3 new audio teasers have dropped for the release of the new Bendy game. This time, Sammy Lawrence, Susie Campbell, and Bertrum Piedmont share their perspectives on working at the studio. So let's see what they can all reveal about the next game. Another Bendy game is coming? You betcha! This video is going to be a bit different from other trailer analysis videos, as I won't be going through the tapes line by line, since you've probably already heard them. If you want to listen to them in full, check the cards on this video or the description for the links, and let me know your thoughts on this format. Let's start with the Sammy tape. Sammy's tape goes into more of how stressful it is to work for Joey Drew, but this one is particularly interesting because it all boils down to him developing an obsession with Bendy. He starts to see Bendy in his sleep and thinks that Bendy is always watching him. It leads us to believe that he is so overworked creating music for the Bendy cartoons that it leads into the character he becomes when Henry returns to the studio. Interestingly, I see another way of looking at this tape that reveals more about the Ink Demon. In 1931, Joey made a tape stating that he was going to renovate and expand the studio and hire more employees. We learn in the first game that he did this to accommodate a massive ink machine in the lower levels of this expansion. However, before this, there was a prototype. The ink machine that we see when we enter the studio. We also know from the first game that Joey used the ink machine to create a figure in the likeness of Bendy, and that no other attempts were made to create another figure of Bendy. Considering that this was just the start of Joey Drew's expectations at the studio, it's safe to say that this Bendy is the same one that chases Henry in the first game. Now, here's where things get a little twisted. In Chapter 2, we discover audio of Norman Polk explaining how Sammy would randomly evacuate stuff from the music studio and then turns on the projector and locks himself inside for long periods of time. Norman also mentioned that he stays there even when the projector turns off, so we know that Sammy is evacuating everyone to access his secret sanctuary. A sanctuary with instruments inside. Which brings us back to the tape. Sammy worries about the idea of Bendy's smile driving him completely insane, mentioning that there's nothing wrong with it, but at the same time someone has to keep the little devil happy. Why would he feel such a way about such a simple cartoon though? The studio's past suggests that Sammy created these songs to make the unworldly figure of Bendy that Joey made happy, and to keep the Ink Demon calm. If they could make the actual character smile, the songs they made would be perfect for cartoons, right? Whether it be Beast Bendy, Ink Bendy, or Cartoon Bendy. A good song would keep all 3 of these out of mischief. Even though he was a failed creation in the real world, Bendy had the ability to sink in and out of the ink at will, so it would be no easy task disposing of him like the other toons. The only thing they could do was keep him happy and contained as best as they could, turning what Sammy called his sanctuary into Bendy's prison. This further explains Sammy's obsession with keeping him happy with calmer songs such as the Sheep Song and the Bendy cutouts. It may even explain Alice Angel's hum and other behaviors, as we know that she was at odds with the Ink Demon and knew how he ticked. Unfortunately for Joey and Sammy, something would tick Bendy off so much that he would realize his true power and take over the entire studio. You may say that this all can't be, as Bendyland was only in planning around 1940 when Bertrum made a tape talking about his plans for the theme park. However, Bendyland and the Ink Machine were 2 different things, and we have to consider that the studio only hosted a storage space for Bendyland attractions. Speaking of Bertrum, let's talk about his tape. In Bertrum's tape, we get to learn more about the tense relationship between Joey and Bertrum. Joey would constantly criticize and ask for changes on all of Bertrum's work, and Bertrum felt that his creations were perfect. A really toxic combination because it leads to a cycle of increasing tension between them. We already knew that there was bad blood between these 2, and this tape shows us more reason as to why, other than just being called Bertie. This indicates that we may get more backstory on Bertrum, especially considering that he was abruptly introduced and taken out in Chapter 4. It's also interesting that he mentions the relationship between creation and creator. One of the key phrases in the game is "the creator lied to us," which may be explained by what Bertrum is saying here. We suspected from other audio teasers that the new Bendy game will explore how Joey experimented with creating 3D toons using the souls of the workers, so this may be a reference to him lying to his employees in some way. With an emphasis on the Bendy theme park in this tape, perhaps the 3D toons really were going to be employed to interact with the customers, and Joey may have come to the decision to accelerate the production of the 3D toons because Bertrum couldn't get his animatronics to work. It's actually quite brutal to think about. Knowing that Bertrum eventually becomes one of his own rides, this tape suggests that he learns of how to bind his soul to machines, much like Joey tries to bind the souls of his employees to the toons, among other monsters. And this makes sense because it didn't sound like Bertrum wanted Joey to know he was one of the rides in Chapter 4. Now on to Susie's tape. Susie's tape honestly isn't that much to write home about, but I do have a couple of interesting points to share. If you followed along with previous videos, this tape seems to confirm some of the suspicions we've had all along, that we will learn more about Susie's backstory and how she was a guinea pig soul for Joey's sick experiments. It really did hurt to hear this one though, since we already know what Susie eventually goes through. That aside, considering this tape along with Bertrum's reveals more that we can expect. Remember in Bendy and the Ink Machine how basically none of Alice Angel's merch sold? Alice herself tells us the story of a character that everyone loved, but ended up falling out of favor with fans. Not only that, the toys were barely stitched together properly by the likes of Sean Flynn, and they were at risk of being melted down to be disposed of. This suggests that another point to be explored in the next Bendy game may involve the complete failure of Alice Angel and the attempt to revive that popularity with a real-life Angel. It seems Joey, knowing that Susie would do anything to keep her role as Alice Angel, takes her position away from her and replaces her with Alison Pendle. A perfect voice match. Then he creates a sad story about the state of the studio and grooms Susie into thinking she has another chance at becoming Alice to gain back the hearts of the fans at Bendyland. Only, he wants far more of her than she ever expected. Having tried and failed at creating a 3D Bendy, he learns that he needs a soul to perfect this craft. To revive one of his creations, streamline the success of Bendyland, and, as a bonus, cheer up an employee that he forced out of her dream job, Joey knew he would be hitting 3 birds with 1 stone. That is, until something goes horribly wrong. Joey uses Susie's soul to create Alice for the first time in the Ink Machine, but she emerges an oozing, pulsing, shapeless slug. Another failure! Susie is returned to the ink and reborn again by the Ink Machine, this time as a melting version of Alice Angel. Close, but yet another failure. Then Joey discards Alice and continues experimenting on the rest of his employees. Alice, knowing that her body wouldn't last long, desperately tries to keep herself together. She begins to slaughter Joey's unholy creations to harvest their organs and thick ink and finds machines that would help her to keep her form. That is, until she finds an errand boy to do that for her, Henry Stein. But it doesn't end there for Susie Campbell. If you want to know more of my thoughts on Susie's involvement, check out this video or tap one of these videos which were picked just for you. Prodigies, I hope these videos help to expand on how you think. See ya!